She was thrown off a cliff by her pack, the alpha king dove after her. The wind howled like 1,000 voices across the jagged cliffs. Rain lashed against the rocks, and the sea below churned like a living beast, white foam roaring against the jagged edges. Lyra clung to the edge of the cliff, her fingers slick with blood and rain, her heart pounding like a war drum. Her own pack had turned on her, betrayal in their eyes and hatred in their hearts. She had given them loyalty, trust, even love, but it had not been enough. The moment had come without warning. They had circled her under the red glow of the moon, teeth bared and eyes burning with fear of what she could become. Whispers of old prophecies and forbidden power had driven them to madness, and now they had thrown her over the cliff. Lyra fell, the cold wind ripping her hair across her face. The roar of the sea grew louder, and she closed her eyes, bracing herself. She thought of her home, of the pack that had raised her, and of the life that was ending before it had barely begun. Her heart ached with betrayal, but even in that darkness a spark of defiance burned inside her. She would not go quietly. The world blurred into gray and black, rain stinging her face as she fell, until suddenly the world shifted. A hand, impossibly strong and warm, caught her. She opened her eyes to see a figure suspended in the storm, tall and imposing. His dark hair whipped around his face, and his eyes were a striking gold, fierce and untouchable. "You shouldn't have been thrown," he said, voice low and commanding, yet strangely gentle. Lyra's heart stuttered. She didn't know who he was, yet some part of her recognized the danger, the power, and the undeniable pull that seemed to draw her to him. Who are you?" she gasped, shivering. "Kale," he said, his gaze never leaving hers. "Alpha King of the Northern clans, and it seems you are far more valuable than they realized." Lyra struggled to speak, to find words that could explain her terror, her confusion, and the sudden strange relief of being saved by someone other than her betrayers. But the words caught in her throat. All she could do was clutch his arm, feel the warmth and strength that seemed to hold her life together. The wind roared around them, but Kale held her steady, his grip iron-strong, yet careful. Slowly he pulled her toward the cliffside, where jagged rocks offered ledges and small footholds. Each movement was precise, calculated, almost unnatural in its grace and control. Once they reached a narrow ledge, Lyra collapsed, shaking, drenched to the bone. Kale knelt beside her, his hand brushing her wet hair from her face. His eyes softened, though the storm reflected in their golden depths. "You're alive," he murmured, "but not for long if they follow." Lyra's mind raced. Her pack, they had powers, yes, but Kale's presence radiated something she had never felt before. Something older, stronger, beyond the mortal rules that governed her life. She wanted to ask him questions to understand, but fear rooted her to the rock. "You don't know me," she said finally, her voice trembling. Why save me?" Kale's gaze darkened, a shadow passing over his face. "Because your death would bring a curse upon us all. And because I did not throw you from a cliff." His words were strange, almost reluctant, as if admitting them cost him something. Lyra stared at him, confusion and curiosity warring inside her. "A curse," she whispered. "Yes," Kale said, eyes glinting like sunlight on steel. "The one your pack feared. They do not understand the forces they meddle with, but I do, and now you are mine to protect." Lyra felt a shiver run through her, part fear, part awe, part something she didn't want to name. There was power in him, yes, but there was also restraint, an undeniable pull that made her heart ache in ways she didn't understand. I don't understand," she admitted. "You will," Kale said quietly, "but first you must survive." He helped her to her feet, supporting her as they moved along the cliff. Every step was dangerous, one slip could mean death. The storm raged, yet Kale's presence made the path seem less impossible, less terrifying. Hours passed. Or perhaps it was only minutes. Time had no meaning in the storm. They finally reached a narrow cave carved into the cliffside. Firelight flickered inside, warm and golden, a small sanctuary against the tempest outside. Kale guided her inside, helping her collapse onto a bed of furs. "You're safe for now," he said, sitting across from her, the firelight casting shadows over his sharp features. "But the storm is not the only danger. Your pack, they will come." Lyra closed her eyes, exhaustion and fear weighing her down. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why not let me fall?" Kale's expression darkened, a storm behind his golden eyes. "Because sometimes even the broken can be more powerful than the strong. And sometimes even the cursed deserve a chance to choose their fate." Lyra's chest tightened. There was something in his tone, something that spoke of loneliness, of pain, of a history she could not yet know. And yet there was also care, a strange and powerful devotion that made her pulse quicken, though she did not understand why. Hours passed. The storm outside subsided slightly, though the clouds still roiled above. Lyra watched Cale as he moved silently around the cave, tending to the small fire, his movements confident and precise. She wanted to speak, to ask about him, about the curse, about why he had saved her, but words seemed small and fragile in the presence of such power. Instead, she simply watched, and in the quiet of the cave, she felt something shift inside her, a spark of trust, or perhaps recognition. Something primal, older than fear or anger, that whispered that she and Cale were connected in ways she could not yet understand. Suddenly, Cale's voice broke the silence. "You must rest. The storm has passed, but the danger has not. Tomorrow I will teach you to defend yourself, to control the power they fear." Lyra nodded, unsure if she could trust him, unsure if she wanted to, but too tired to argue. She curled on the furs, feeling the warmth seep into her soaked bones. Outside, the wind still howled, but inside there was a fragile bubble of safety. As she drifted into uneasy sleep, she could not stop thinking about Cale, the strength, the danger, the strange pull of his gaze. And deep down, a tiny ember of hope flickered. Perhaps she had not been thrown away entirely. Perhaps her story was not over. But then a thought crept in, cold and sharp as the rain. The pack would come. They would not forget her betrayal, and they would not forgive. And Cale had saved her for reasons she could not yet understand. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was a single, desperate question. What did it mean that he had dived into the storm for her? And the answer, like the waves crashing below, was somewhere beyond her reach. The night stretched on, dark and endless, carrying the whispers of danger, the weight of curses, and the echo of a promise that neither Cale nor Lyra could yet name. And in the shadows beyond the cave, unseen and waiting, eyes watched. The pack that had betrayed her had not forgotten. They would come for her and for Cale. And when they arrived, the first test of trust, power, and fate would begin. The cliff's edge, the storm, the sea below, it had been a fall. But the real journey, the one that would change both of their lives, had only just begun. The storm had passed, leaving the cliffs slick with rain and the forest below heavy with mist. Lyra awoke to a quiet she had not known for a long time. The cave was empty, save for the warm fire Cale had tended before disappearing into the shadows. The faint scent of pine and wet stone filled her senses. She rubbed her eyes and tried to shake off the remnants of sleep, but the weight of what had happened lingered, pressing against her chest. She had survived the fall, but survival was only the beginning. Her mind spun with questions. Who was Cale truly? Why had he saved her? And most importantly, what was the curse her pack had feared so deeply? Cale returned, moving like a shadow over the stone floor. His presence was commanding yet careful, like a predator that knew when to strike and when to wait. When he knelt before her, offering a hand to help her stand, Lyra felt an inexplicable shiver. She didn't trust him fully, and yet in that moment she had no choice but to accept his strength. "We must move," he said quietly, his golden eyes glinting in the firelight. "Your safety depends on knowledge, and survival depends on understanding your own power." Lyra nodded, although a mixture of fear and defiance burned in her chest. "My power?" she repeated. "I don't even know what I can do. How can I protect myself if I don't understand it?" Cale's lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "You will learn, and I will teach you, but first you must trust me." Trust was not easy. Betrayal ran through her veins like ice, a reminder of the pack that had thrown her to her death. Yet something about Cale's gaze, steady and unwavering, anchored her in a strange way. They left the cave, moving through a forest thick with fog. Every tree seemed to hold a memory, a secret, as if the land itself knew what was happening. Cale guided her along hidden paths, places the eye of the ordinary traveler could never see. The forest was alive, shadows twisting around them like silent watchers, yet they passed through safely. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a clearing. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting golden streaks across the dewy grass. At the center stood a pool of water so clear it reflected the sky like glass. Cale gestured toward it. "This is where you begin," he said. "Here you will see yourself truly. Not just your body, but your soul, your power, your potential." Lyra hesitated. She approached the pool, feeling the soft grass under her feet, the wind brushing against her soaked hair. She looked into the water, and for a moment she saw only her reflection, pale, trembling, haunted. Then the surface shimmered, revealing something else. Flames of light danced around her figure, subtle but undeniable. A power she had never known was waiting within her. "You see it," Kale said softly, watching her. "The power your pack feared, it is not evil. It is strength waiting for control, but if left unchecked, it can consume you as it can consume anyone." Lyra's heart pounded. "How do I control it?" she asked, voice trembling. Kale stepped closer, his shadow falling over her reflection. "Through focus, through discipline, and through understanding who you are, who you choose to be." The lessons began that day. Kale was relentless. He pushed her body and mind, teaching her to control the spark that roared beneath her skin. Every step, every breath, every movement was a test. Sometimes she failed, and the power flared in bursts of light and heat. But Kale never left her side, his hands steady, his voice calm, guiding her through each surge of energy. Days passed like this, each moment a mixture of tension and wonder. Lyra discovered that she could bend the air, shape shadows, and even call whispers from the forest to her. With each small victory, her confidence grew, though fear lingered. Every time she mastered something new, she remembered the betrayal, remembered the cliff, remembered the pack that would not forgive. Kale watched her progress with a mix of pride and caution. He understood the danger she posed, not just to herself, but to the delicate balance of the clans. And yet in her struggle, he saw something he had long forgotten: hope, perhaps even redemption. The nights were the hardest. Lyra would lie awake on the firs, listening to the wind in the trees, hearing Kale move silently nearby. She tried to sleep, but the memories of her pack and the thrill of new power kept her heart racing. And always there was Kale, near yet distant, a force she both feared and longed for. One night, as the fire crackled low, Kale approached her quietly. "You have done well today," he said, voice soft, almost vulnerable. "But there is more you must see. Power alone is not enough. You must understand your heart, your choices, your limits." Lyra turned toward him, her golden eyes reflecting the firelight. "I don't know if I can," she admitted. "I don't know who I am anymore. All I know is fear and anger and—" She trailed off, her voice catching. Kale knelt beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "And what?" he asked gently. Lyra looked down, ashamed of the truth that burned in her chest. "And I feel something for you. I don't understand it. I don't want it, but it's there." Kale's eyes softened, a rare flicker of vulnerability in the storm of his presence. "You do not need to understand it yet. Only acknowledge it. We are both changed by what has happened." That is natural. The closeness, the intensity, the pull between them was a new danger. One neither could name, yet both could feel. Lyra's pulse quickened, her body tense, yet part of her felt safer than she had in years. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her, violent, unpredictable, yet alive. Their training continued, growing more demanding. Kale pushed her to confront fears she had buried long ago. He showed her how to sense danger, to move with the forest, to harness the light and shadows around her. Each lesson brought them closer, the emotional tension between them deepening. Lyra felt herself relying on him, needing him, yet terrified that trust might lead to heartbreak or betrayal. One evening, Kale brought her to the cliffs once more. The wind was calmer, and the sea below sparkled in the twilight. He stood at the edge, looking out over the vast expanse of water, and Lyra followed his gaze. "Do you see it?" he asked quietly. "Do you see the choices that lie ahead?" Lyra nodded, though her stomach tightened. "I see danger, and I see power, but I also see you. And I don't know what that means." Kale turned to her, his eyes golden and unreadable. "It means that you are alive and that you are not alone. It also means that those who betrayed you will come. They will test you and they will test me. You must be ready." Lyra swallowed hard, fear and determination warred within her. "I will be ready," she said, though doubt gnawed at her. Kale stepped closer, the wind tugging at his dark hair, the fire of sunset casting him in gold and shadow. "Good. Because the world is not kind to those who are weak, and neither am I." That night, as they returned to the hidden cave, Lyra could not sleep. She lay awake, thinking of the power within her, the danger outside, and the pull she felt toward Kale. Her heart ached with longing, yet she feared what that longing might demand of her. The next day brought a test. Kale led her to a glade deep in the forest, where ancient stones formed a circle around a pool of water. Shadows flickered strangely, as if alive, and Lyra felt the weight of the forest pressing down on her. "Here," Kale said, "you will face what you fear most. Only by confronting it can you control it." Lyra stepped into the circle, and immediately visions swirled around her. She saw her pack, snarling and cruel, circling her. She saw the cliff, the fall, the cold sea below. And she saw Kale, standing at the edge, reaching out to her, his face both terrifying and comforting. Tears streamed down her face, but she forced herself to breathe, to center herself, to call upon the power within. Shadows bent to her will, the wind obeyed her command, and light shimmered where darkness had dominated. When the visions faded, she was trembling but victorious. She had faced her fears and she had survived. Kale knelt beside her once more. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "And stronger than I feared, but there is still more. The pack will come, and when they do, you must be ready to fight, not just with power, but with heart." Lyra nodded, feeling a strange surge of courage. The fear was still there, but it was joined by something else, determination. And something else, too, a bond that neither of them yet named, but both could feel. A fragile, dangerous thread of trust, of longing, of connection. As the sun set behind the trees, the golden light fading into deep blue, Lyra knew one thing for certain. She was no longer the girl who had fallen from the cliff. She was something new, something dangerous, something alive. And Kale, fierce and unyielding, was both her teacher and her anchor in a world that would not forgive weakness. But deep in the shadows beyond the forest, eyes watched. The pack that had betrayed her had not forgotten, and they would not wait long to strike. The storm of the past had passed, but a greater storm was coming, one that would test not just her power, but her heart. And in the quiet between wind and shadow, Lyra felt it, the first stirrings of a love she could not yet name, and a danger she could not yet escape. The forest was silent in a way that made Lyra's skin prickle. Mist curled along the roots of ancient trees, and the soft sound of water dripping echoed like whispers of a forgotten world. She walked beside Kale, each step measured, careful. The lessons of the past days had sharpened her senses. She could feel the subtle hum of energy in the trees, the faint stirrings of creatures that moved unseen. Yet, despite her growing power, a chill ran through her heart. She knew the pack that had thrown her from the cliff had not given up. They would come for her, and they would come for Kale. Kale's expression was unreadable as he led her to the edge of the forest, where sunlight struggled to pierce the dense canopy. "They are near," he said quietly. "Do you feel it?" Lyra nodded. Her heart thumped in her chest. Fear, yes, but also something else, a spark of courage that she had not felt before. "I feel them, but I am not afraid," she said, though the words tasted strange on her tongue. She was still afraid, but she refused to let it dominate her. Kale's eyes softened. "Good. Fear is natural, it keeps you alive, but courage is what will make you unstoppable." They stepped into a small clearing where the air seemed heavier, charged with energy. And then they saw them, her pack standing like shadows among the trees. Eyes gleamed with hostility, jaws tight, their stances ready for attack. Lyra's chest tightened. The pack that had once been her family now felt like strangers, dangerous strangers who had turned on her without hesitation. "You dare return?" One of the pack members spat, a cruel sneer twisting his face. Lyra drew in a deep breath, feeling the energy rise inside her. She did not reach for her powers yet. First, she needed to understand the heart of the matter. "I did not return to fight you," she said, voice steady. "I came to face what we are. I came to understand why betrayal matters less than the truth." The pack laughed, sharp and bitter. "Truth," another said. "The truth is you are weak, Lyra. You could not survive without the king who saved you." Kale stepped forward, his presence commanding. "You underestimate her at your peril," he said. "She has survived what none of you could imagine. And she has power you cannot comprehend." Lyra felt a surge of pride, tempered by caution. She had grown stronger, yes, but she had not yet faced the full measure of her enemies. And in that moment she realized something crucial. Power alone would not be enough. She needed strategy, trust, and control over her emotions. The pack advanced slowly, circling her, testing her like predators around prey. But Lyra did not back down. Instead, she focused on the energy within her, the currents that Kale had taught her to sense, to command. Shadows bent slightly toward her will, leaves stirred unnaturally, and the wind whispered her presence back at her. Kale remained at her side, a pillar of strength and calm. "Remember your control," he whispered. "Your power is a reflection of your heart. Focus and it will protect you." Lyra nodded, centering herself. She could feel her pulse, the rhythm of her breath, the steady thrum of energy flowing through her veins. And then she spoke, her voice firm. "I am not weak. I am not afraid. And I will not be controlled by fear or hate." The pack faltered. Surprise flashed in their eyes. They had expected a trembling girl, scared and desperate. Instead, they saw someone who had grown beyond their understanding. Lyra's power pulsed around her, subtle but undeniable, as if the very forest had aligned with her will. One of her old friends stepped forward, trembling. "Lyra, please," he said. "We only wanted to protect you. We didn't know what the king would do." Lyra's heart twisted. Betrayal had come from fear, from misunderstanding, and perhaps even from love misdirected. She felt anger, yes, but also a flicker of compassion. "You acted from fear," she said softly, "and fear is always dangerous, but it can be redeemed. You can still choose differently." Cale's hand brushed hers, subtle and grounding. She felt a warmth spread through her, not just from him, but from the bond that had formed between them. Together they were stronger, yet the choice, the responsibility, remained hers. Suddenly, the air shifted. A shadow moved faster than the eye could see, a rival from her pack striking at Cale. Lyra reacted instinctively, summoning her power. Shadows surged around her, creating a barrier that deflected the attack. Cale moved with precision, intercepting the next strike with ease. The confrontation was not loud or chaotic. It was a dance of controlled power, strategy, and instinct. Lyra realized in that moment that she had truly changed. She was no longer the girl thrown from the cliff, powerless and afraid. She was a force, tempered by fear but guided by purpose. When the skirmish ended, the pack retreated, wary and hesitant. They had underestimated her. They had underestimated Cale. And most of all, they had underestimated the bond that now existed between the two of them. Lyra sank to the ground, exhausted but alive. Cale knelt beside her, his golden eyes filled with concern and admiration. "You were remarkable," he said quietly. "Do you understand now? Your power is not just strength. It is your choice, your heart, your courage. That is what makes you unstoppable." Lyra looked up at him, seeing not just the Alpha King, not just the protector, but something more, someone who had shared the danger, who had seen her fear and her courage, who had chosen to stand beside her. She felt a stirring in her chest, a mixture of gratitude, trust, and something deeper she could not yet name. "You were remarkable too," she said softly. "I could not have done this without you." Cale's gaze lingered on her, the firelight in his eyes flickering with something she could not decipher. "Perhaps," he said, voice low, "but you did it, all of it, and that is what matters. You are more than you realize." They returned to the cave in silence, the tension of the day settling into a calm that was almost foreign. Lyra curled on the furs, reflecting on the events, her powers, and her connection with Cale. She was learning that strength came not just from abilities, but from trust, from courage, and from understanding the balance between fear and love. That night, as the fire flickered low, Cale spoke again. "There is more to come," he said quietly. "The pack may have retreated for now, but this is only the beginning. You must be prepared for trials that will test not just your power, but your heart." Lyra nodded, feeling both anticipation and dread. She had grown stronger, yes, but she knew that real challenges lay ahead. And yet she was no longer the frightened girl she had been. She was someone who could face betrayal, survive the impossible, and still choose compassion and courage. As she drifted toward sleep, Lyra felt Cale's presence beside her, steady and unwavering. The bond between them had deepened, unspoken but undeniable. She felt a strange warmth, a sense of safety that had been foreign to her life. And with it came a small, fragile hope. Perhaps even in a world of betrayal, even in the shadow of curses, there was a place for trust, for courage, and for love. The night was quiet, but in the distance, a howl echoed through the forest, a reminder that danger was never far, that the pack was still out there, and that their story was far from over. And in that echo, Lyra felt the stirrings of a choice she would have to make, not just between survival and fear, but between the pull of her heart and the demands of destiny. She was no longer the girl who had fallen from the cliff. She was stronger, braver, and more alive than ever before. But the journey ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine, and the bond she shared with Cale would be challenged, stretched, and ultimately transformed. In the quiet of the cave, under the light of a fading moon, Lyra understood one truth. The past had shaped her, but it did not define her. The power within her, the courage she had discovered, and the bond with Cale, these were her own. And they would carry her forward into a future that was hers to claim. But beyond the forest, beyond the mountains, eyes still watched. The pack that had betrayed her had not given up. And when the next confrontation came, it would not just be a test of strength. It would be a test of heart, trust, and the courage to choose redemption over revenge. And somewhere deep inside, Lyra felt a thrill of anticipation, the stirring of hope, and the undeniable pull of a bond that would not be broken, no matter the trials to come. The cliffs were silent, bathed in the silver light of a full moon. The wind carried the faint scent of the sea, and the stars shimmered above like scattered fragments of ancient magic. Lyra stood at the edge, the memory of her fall long behind her, yet never forgotten. She had survived betrayal, mastered her power, and faced her fears. But tonight she knew the greatest challenge awaited. Cale stood beside her, tall and unwavering, golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. His presence was both grounding and electrifying, a steady current beneath the storm of emotions inside her. Together they had faced danger, trained, and grown, but the curse, the shadow that had followed her since her pack had thrown her from the cliff, still lingered. "You feel it too, don't you?" Lyra asked softly, her voice almost lost in the wind. Cale nodded. "Yes. The final trial is near. The curse will test not just your power, but your heart, and if we fail, it may take everything we've built." Lyra drew in a deep breath. Fear lingered, but it was tempered by the strength she had earned. "I am ready," she said, though the truth was that she could never be fully ready. There was always uncertainty, always the unknown, but she would face it anyway. Cale extended his hand. "Then we face it together." They moved toward the center of the cliffs, where a circle of ancient stones waited, weathered by centuries and humming with magic. Shadows twisted unnaturally, and the air felt thick with expectation. The curse was here, its presence like a living thing, testing them before the confrontation had even begun. Cale stepped forward, chanting softly in a language older than memory. Lyra mirrored him, though her voice trembled at first. The words resonated through the stones, and light began to rise, swirling like liquid silver around them. The visions appeared, their worst fears made manifest. Lyra saw her pack again, snarling and accusing, faces twisted by rage and betrayal. She saw the cliff, the fall, the cold sea that had almost claimed her, and she saw Cale, his throne, his legacy, and the burdens of a kingdom that depended on him. "Focus on us," Cale said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Not on fear, not on the past. Only on the bond we share, only on the strength you have gained." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the surge of power within her. The energy of the forest, the mountains, and even the sea below coursed through her. The visions roared, trying to overwhelm her, but she reached for Cale's hand, and the connection anchored her. Together, their energy intertwined, light and shadow dancing around them, a force neither could have wielded alone. The storm of visions pressed harder, testing her resolve, whispering doubt, fear, and guilt. But Lyra remembered the lessons Cale had taught her: control, focus, courage, and heart. She pushed back against the illusions, bending the shadows to her will, and the light around them flared brighter. Cale's voice rang out over the roar of the wind. "We are stronger together. Do not let it divide you. Trust in what we have built." Lyra felt the connection strengthen, the fear begin to break, replaced by something fierce and unyielding. She saw the curse for what it truly was, a reflection of the past, a test of heart and will, and she realized that it could not hold them if they faced it as one. "Now," she cried, her voice echoing across the cliffs. Together they unleashed a wave of energy, a force born of trust, courage, and love. The shadows screamed and twisted, then dissipated, leaving only calm. The stones lay quiet, the curse broken, dissolved by the strength of their unity. Lyra sank to her knees, exhausted, her body trembling but her heart soaring. Cale knelt beside her, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. His touch was gentle, grounding, yet charged with the power that had guided them both through darkness. "You did it," he said softly, awe in his voice. "You have faced it, and you have conquered it." Lyra looked at him, and for the first time she truly understood the depth of their bond. "We did it," she whispered. "Together." Cale's eyes softened, golden light mingling with the silver of the moon. "Yes, together, and that is what makes us strong. You are no longer just the girl who fell from the cliff. You are something more, something extraordinary." The wind calmed, carrying with it a sense of renewal. The forest seemed to breathe, the sea below shimmering like a mirror. Lyra felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the shadows of the past finally dissolving. The pain, the fear, the betrayal, it had shaped her, but it no longer controlled her. They rose, standing side by side on the cliffs, looking out over the land that had once seemed so threatening, now filled with possibility. Cale reached out, his hand brushing against hers, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had been forged in fire, shadow, and storm. "Your journey is not over," Cale said quietly. There will always be challenges, threats, and choices, but now you have the power, the courage, and the heart to face them. Lyra nodded, feeling a deep sense of calm and clarity. She had been betrayed, nearly destroyed, and yet she had risen, stronger and wiser. And in that journey she had found trust, courage, and even love, a bond that was no longer unspoken but understood, felt in every heartbeat. As they stood together, the first light of dawn began to pierce the horizon. Gold and pink streaked across the sky, reflecting in the calm waters below. The world felt reborn, and Lyra felt herself reborn along with it. I never thought I would feel peace again, Lyra admitted softly. Not after everything. Kale smiled faintly, eyes warm. Peace is not given, it is earned, and you have earned it, Lyra, through courage, through heart, and through choice. You have chosen not to be defined by fear or betrayal. You have chosen life, power, and me. Lyra's heart fluttered, a mixture of surprise, gratitude, and something deeper. I choose us, she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotion inside her. Kale took her hands in his, the warmth of his touch grounding her in a way that words could not. Then we move forward together, he said, voice low, resonant, full of certainty. And whatever comes, we face it as one. The cliffs were quiet, the forest peaceful, the sea calm. Lyra and Kale stood together, a bond forged in darkness and fear, tempered by trust and courage. They had faced betrayal, mastered power, and broken the curse that had threatened to consume them both. But as they looked toward the horizon, a distant howl carried across the land. Lyra tensed for a moment, a flicker of old fear rising. Kale's hand tightened around hers, grounding her. Not yet, he said softly, smiling. The world will always test us, but we are ready, and we will face it together. Lyra nodded, feeling the truth of his words deep within her. She had fallen, yes, but she had risen. She had faced betrayal and danger, learned to master her power, and discovered a bond stronger than fear or hatred. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a force, a heart of courage, and a soul that had chosen love over despair. The sun rose higher, spilling golden light across the cliffs, illuminating the land below. The shadows of the past seemed to shrink, replaced by the promise of renewal, hope, and a future they would shape together. Kale stepped closer, brushing the rain from her hair, his eyes shining with pride and something tender she could not yet name. The world may not be easy, he said softly, but we will meet it side by side. You have my strength as I have yours. Lyra smiled, a rare, true smile that came from deep within. And I will never let you face it alone, she said. For the first time in a long while, the wind carried no threat, no danger, only possibility. And together, Lyra and Kale stepped forward from the cliffs, ready to face whatever came next, stronger, braver, and bound by a bond that had been tested, tempered, and proven unbreakable. The fall had been the beginning. The curse had been the trial. And now the journey of courage, trust, and love truly began.